They say the biggest financial events in history don't begin with alarms. They begin with silence. A silence so quiet that almost nobody notices the shift until it's already irreversible. And right now, that silence is coming from the United States government, the most indebted nation in human history, as it quietly prepares the largest financial reset of the 21st century. Not with taxes, not with spending cuts, not with productivity, but with crypto and gold. Before we go deeper, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to understand what's really happening behind the headlines before the rest of the world wakes up. Now, let's begin. The problem: $37 trillion and no escape. The United States officially owes $37 trillion in federal debt. That's more than the GDP of China, the combined value of Apple, Microsoft, Saudi Aramco, Amazon, and Alphabet. The entire U.S. economy in the year 2000. And here's the most terrifying part. The U.S. doesn't need to pay this debt. It just needs to survive it. But mathematically, politically, and structurally, the U.S. cannot repay $37 trillion under the current monetary system. Interest alone is spiraling out of control. The deficit is permanent, and foreign demand for treasuries is falling. When you reach that point, you have only three options: default, impossible for a global reserve currency; austerity, political suicide; inflationary debt erasure, the silent option. Every empire in history chose option 3. Rome diluted its silver coins. Britain printed its way out after World War II. The Soviet Union debased the ruble as the system collapsed. The United States is choosing a modern version of the same strategy, but this time, the tools are digital, decentralized, and more powerful than ever. The U.S. playbook: inflate, reprice, reset. The strategy unfolding isn't about paying debt. It's about redefining it. The logic is simple. If the U.S. government cannot pay $37 trillion in today's dollars, then it must lower the value of tomorrow's dollars. How? By shifting the global monetary system into a new framework where gold plays a larger role as a stabilizer, crypto becomes an instrument of liquidity, tracking, and monetary expansion, the dollar transitions into a digital reserve asset with built-in control mechanisms. In other words, a soft reset without calling it a reset. And the craziest part? It's already happening. The quiet accumulation. Gold. For decades, the U.S. government pretended that gold was irrelevant, a barbaric relic. But behind the scenes, central banks around the world began accumulating gold at record levels. China, India, Turkey, Russia, Singapore. But the U.S. didn't need to buy more gold because it already controls one of the largest gold reserves in the world. The real strategy wasn't accumulation. It was revaluation. You don't need more gold if you can simply make the gold you already own worth more. By allowing gold prices to rise or even quietly facilitating it, the U.S. increases the value of its reserves, which strengthens the balance sheet of the nation without ever printing a dollar. Gold becomes the anchor for the next phase of monetary architecture. And what pairs perfectly with gold? A programmable dollar. The digital tool, crypto. Crypto is not an enemy of the U.S. It's the testing environment for what comes next. Stablecoins, decentralized liquidity, tokenized assets. These are not threats, they're prototypes. Prototypes for instant settlement, borderless liquidity,
traceable capital flows, automated monetary policy, programmable inflation. The U.S. government is watching every experiment, every protocol, every failed blockchain project, not because it fears crypto, but because it intends to absorb it. Bitcoin becomes digital gold. Ethereum becomes programmable infrastructure. Stablecoins become liquidity engines. And eventually, after years of experimentation, the U.S. reveals the real plan, a digital dollar that merges the control of a central bank with the flexibility of crypto and the stability of gold. This is how modern debt is erased, not by paying it, but by migrating it into a new system where money can be diluted, redefined, and repriced without public resistance. A system where inflation isn't just a side effect, but a feature. Why the U.S. needs crypto to erase debt. Crypto gives the U.S. three superpowers. 1. Digitized money supply expansion. The U.S. can create liquidity faster than ever before without relying on the traditional banking system. 2. Controlled inflation behind a digital curtain. Inflation becomes programmable, adjustable, and more subtle. 3. A new form of dollar demand. If the digital dollar becomes the infrastructure of global trade, U.S. debt loses its meaning because the world will be forced to hold digital dollars. It's the same trick used in 1944 with the Bretton Woods system, and again in 1971 when Nixon ended the gold standard. Only this time, the shift is technological, not political. How gold and crypto work together. Gold provides trust. Crypto provides technology. The dollar provides dominance. Together, they allow the U.S. to inflate the legacy dollar, strengthen assets it already owns, gold, build a new class of digital assets, slowly transition the world into a monetary system where $37 trillion becomes irrelevant. Because once the monetary system changes, the definition of debt changes with it. The invisible reset has already started. You're living in the middle of a transition that will define the next 50 years of global economics. Gold at all-time highs, crypto increasingly institutionalized, banks tokenizing assets, governments experimenting with digital currencies, the U.S. quietly preparing a system where the old debt structure becomes obsolete. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a pattern. Every empire devalues its currency to survive, but no empire before had the ability to do it digitally, globally, and silently. What comes next? In the next block, we'll uncover the hidden alliances between Wall Street, Washington, and crypto giants, the secret role of ETFs in the new monetary architecture, how the U.S. plans to weaponize digital liquidity against rising economic rivals, and why everyday investors are unknowingly funding the reset.
The biggest financial transformations in history never happen in a vacuum. They happen through alliances, silent, strategic, and invisible to the public eye. Just like in 1913, when bankers and politicians secretly met on Jekyll Island to create the Federal Reserve. Just like in 1944, when the world gathered at Bretton Woods to rebuild the monetary order. And just like in 1971, when Nixon quietly severed gold from the dollar, reshaping the global economy overnight. Today, another alliance is forming. But this time, it's not inside a smoke-filled room. It's happening through digital infrastructure, corporate partnerships, and regulatory guidance disguised as protection. The hidden alliance behind the reset.
Three groups are quietly coordinating the greatest financial repositioning of our era. Washington, policy plus monetary authority. Wall Street, liquidity plus institutional adoption. Crypto ecosystem becomes the testing ground, the laboratory where the future of money is engineered in real time. Their shared objective is simple: make the legacy $37 trillion debt irrelevant by transitioning into a new form of money. The Wall Street turnaround, from crypto is dangerous to crypto is the new treasury market. For years, institutions mocked crypto. They said, it's a scam, it's a bubble, it's for criminals, it will go to zero. But everything changed when Washington realized two things. Crypto could be regulated and absorbed, not banned. And digital assets could become liquidity tools to manage and dilute debt. And in one of the fastest reversals in financial history, Wall Street suddenly embraced crypto like it was the next gold rush. BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, Goldman Sachs, the same institutions that once dismissed crypto now treat digital assets as essential to the future financial system. Not because they believe in crypto, but because crypto gives them exactly what they need: a new, programmable asset class that can absorb trillions of dollars of liquidity. This is where the ETFs come in. ETFs, the Trojan horse of the new dollar system. The ETF structure is the perfect infiltration mechanism. It allows massive capital inflows, government oversight, institutional control, integration with the global banking system, a bridge between traditional finance and digital assets. Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETFs, tokenized assets. These ETFs are not the end. They are the beginning. Each ETF channels institutional money into the new system without alarming the public. Think of it this way. In the 1970s, petrodollars held global demand for U.S. currency. In the 2020s, crypto ETFs may become the new demand engine for digital dollars. ETFs bring regulation, tax tracking, liquidity, transparency, and scalability, the exact ingredients needed for a smooth transition into a programmable financial system. And while the public thinks ETFs are just investment products, Washington knows better. ETFs are the gateway to the next monetary era. The digital dollar infrastructure is already being built. Everyone assumes the digital dollar is a future concept. It's not. It already exists, just not in public form yet. Here's the hidden infrastructure. Number 1. Tokenization of U.S. Treasuries. Banks, hedge funds, and sovereign wealth funds are experimenting with blockchain-based T-bills. This will make U.S. debt instant to trade, global, smart contract compatible, and attractive to institutional investors. In other words, easier to inflate and easier to reprice.
2. Tokenization of the dollar itself. Stablecoins already process more money per year than Visa. This is not an accident. Stablecoins are the test version of the future digital dollar. 3. Bank-to-bank blockchain networks. JP Morgan's Onyx network processes billions in tokenized transactions. Citicott, HSBC, and BNY Mellon are joining. These networks are the hidden plumbing of a programmable dollar. 4. Regulatory approval by delay. The U.S. doesn't need to ban crypto. It only needs to regulate it just enough to guide it into the system. And the system is already here. The gold play, revaluation without announcement. While Wall Street embraces digital assets, Washington quietly strengthens its most ancient weapon, gold. Not by accumulating it, but by allowing, even encouraging, its price to rise. Every $100 increase in gold adds billions in unrealized value to U.S. reserves.
A rising gold price strengthens national balance sheets, supports the digital dollar as a soft peg asset, helps manage inflation optics, increases confidence in a currency transition. It's not about a return to the gold standard. It's about using gold to stabilize the optics of an unstable digital transformation. Gold is the psychological anchor. Crypto is the technological engine. The dollar is the political weapon. Together, they form the trifecta that makes $37 trillion of debt melt into irrelevance. How the U.S. uses crypto liquidity to quietly dilute the dollar. The most brilliant part of the strategy is that the public never sees the dilution happening. Here's how the process unfolds. Crypto attracts global liquidity, a new demand engine. ETFs and tokenized assets institutionalize it. Digital asset inflation absorbs excess dollars. The digital dollar system expands faster than traditional debt. The ratio of debt to liquidity improves without reducing the actual debt. Inflation is blamed on external factors, not monetary strategy. Debt effectively shrinks in real terms, just like after World War II. It's not printing money. It's redirecting money into a new asset class where inflation is harder to measure, harder to resist, and easier to justify. This is how empires devalue without panic. The global game, outmaneuvering China and BRICS. Every monetary shift is also geopolitical. China, Russia, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, they want gold-backed settlement, petro-yuan, BRICS currency alternatives, decentralized global trade. The U.S. cannot allow this, but the digital dollar solves the problem. By merging crypto infrastructure with dollar dominance, the U.S. can track global money flows, offer faster settlement, provide programmable liquidity, undercut BRICS with speed and convenience, maintain control without military force. Crypto becomes the new battlefield, not for ideology, but for monetary survival. Where all this leads. By the time the digital dollar system becomes official, the transformation will already be complete. The public will believe it's about innovation, security, fraud prevention, faster payments. But behind the curtain, the real purpose will be simple: to erase the meaning of $37 trillion in debt by redefining the money that measures it. The U.S. won't pay the debt. It will outgrow it. Digitally, silently, permanently. What we cover in Block 3. In the final block, we will uncover how the U.S. plans to execute the final stage of the monetary reset, what the digital dollar will look like, the winners and losers of the transition, the psychological narrative the government will use to convince the public, and how individuals can protect themselves before the shift becomes official.
Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. If you want to understand what happens in the next 24 months, before it hits the news, before politicians deny it, and before the markets react, this is where you'll see it first. Now let's complete the story. For the past decade, the U.S. has been building the foundations for a digital transformation that most people still think is experimental. What they don't realize is that the most important part of the plan is already in motion. Crypto was the test. Gold was the anchor. Wall Street was the transmission belt. And Washington was the architect overseeing the transformation. Now comes the final phase, the moment when the U.S. officially transitions from a debt-based dollar to a digitally managed dollar, quietly redefining what $37 trillion actually means. This is not inflation. This is not devaluation. This is system replacement. And the world won't understand it until it's already finished. The final step, the programmable dollar. The U.S. won't simply release a digital version of the dollar.
It will release an entirely new monetary system designed around 4 pillars. 1. Programmability. Every unit of money can carry instructions: where it can be spent, how fast it can move, whether it can expire, what taxes apply automatically. This gives the government the power to control the speed of money at levels never seen before. 2. Traceability. Every digital dollar can be tracked across the global financial system. No more offshore secrecy. No more anonymous transactions. Capital becomes transparent by design. 3. Automated taxation. Money will self-report, self-calculate, self-remit. The IRS becomes a platform, not an agency. 4. Fluid monetary expansion. The U.S. can inject liquidity directly into the digital dollar network with precision, to banks, to corporations, to households, to international partners. No printing, no legislative process, just programmable issuance. This is the final tool needed to make legacy debt irrelevant. How the U.S. makes $37 trillion disappear without saying a word. The U.S. doesn't need to erase the debt line on the spreadsheet. It only needs to make the value of the system around the debt grow faster than the debt itself. The digital dollar does this in 3 steps. Step 1. Expand the digital monetary base. New forms of liquidity increase the size of the financial system. Step 2. Reprice assets under the new system. Gold, tokenized treasuries, tokenized real estate, tokenized commodities. Everything becomes more valuable in digital terms. Step 3. Let legacy debt inflate away silently. Not through consumer inflation, but through asset-side inflation, where the denominator, the dollar system, changes faster than the numerator, the debt. It's the same trick the U.S. used after World War II, but now it's executed with surgical precision. The narrative that will convince the public. The government won't say, "We are resetting the financial system." Instead, it will use softer, safer language. Faster payments, more security, modernizing the dollar, protecting consumers, fighting fraud, boosting innovation. Just like every major financial shift in history, the public is told it's about convenience, not survival. Digital ID? Necessary for security. Programmable transactions? Necessary for efficiency. Fully traceable payments? Necessary to stop crime. What begins as convenience becomes infrastructure. What becomes infrastructure becomes law. And what becomes law becomes unavoidable. This is how transitions happen.
Winners of the reset. 1. The U.S. government. Because it finally gets a monetary system that can expand and self-regulate without political friction. 2. Wall Street institutions. They will control the gateway between traditional assets and digital liquidity. ETFs, custody, settlement networks, tokenized instruments. They become the new Federal Reserve branches of the digital era. 3. Early adopters of crypto and gold. Because the assets they accumulated during the transition will explode in relevance. Bitcoin as digital gold, Ethereum as infrastructure, gold as strategic reserve. They become the new royalty of financial transformation. 4. The digital dollar ecosystem. Fintechs,
stablecoin issuers, blockchain settlement networks, all central to the new machine. Losers of the reset. 1. Savers in legacy dollars. Traditional savings accounts will lose purchasing power relative to digital assets and tokenized markets. 2. Countries reliant on the old petrodollar system. The Middle East, parts of Europe, and developing nations tied to physical dollar flows will struggle to adapt. 3. People who misunderstand what's happening. People who believe this is just a crypto trend will wake up too late. 4. Privacy advocates. A fully traceable dollar is the end of financial anonymity. The psychological shock. When the new system is announced, the biggest impact won't be economic, it will be psychological. People will ask, why do we need this? Is the dollar changing? Is the current system failing? What happens to my savings? Governments will respond with, nothing is changing. This is just a technological update. Everything is safe. But behind closed doors, the truth will be clear. A digital dollar system is the only way to manage, dilute, and oversee a $37 trillion debt burden without a formal default. It's the only path that avoids hyperinflation, austerity, political collapse, global loss of confidence. It's the only solution that preserves power. The global consequences. China will accelerate its digital yuan, but it will compete against a more powerful digital dollar. BRICS will push gold-backed settlement, but liquidity will still favor programmable dollars. Europe will follow the US because the ECB cannot fall behind. Developing nations will lose autonomy as programmable dollars give the US deeper influence over capital flows. The world will split between countries who adopt the digital dollar standard and countries who attempt to resist it and suffer. What individuals can do before the reset goes public. This is not financial advice, it's historical observation. Every monetary transition has predictable outcomes. Store of value assets rise. Fiat savings lose purchasing power. Real productivity becomes undervalued. Digital assets gain relevance. Governments tighten control. To prepare, individuals historically protect themselves by holding value in scarce assets, like gold, digital gold. Strengthening income streams. Understanding the new financial rails. Positioning early. The people who suffered most during past resets were not the poorest, but the ones who misunderstood the transition. The moment of realization. There will be a day, maybe in the next 2 to 4 years, when the US appears on television and announces something like, "We're excited to introduce the next step in American financial innovation, the digital dollar." Markets will celebrate. Politicians will congratulate themselves. Consumers will welcome the convenience. And the debt clock will continue spinning. But no one will care anymore. Because the meaning of the debt will have changed. The system that measures the debt will have changed. And the dollar itself will have changed. Quietly, elegantly, inevitably. Before we close this series, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you want to understand how these global shifts are unfolding and how they affect your future, your savings, and your opportunities, this is the place where we break down what the world refuses to say out loud.